Microsoft just turned Dataverse into an MCP server, which means any AI client can now speak to your business data. The Microsoft documentation isn't as straightforward as maybe you'd like, so in this video I'm going to show you exactly how to get that set up. My name is Halden Rashid, Microsoft MVP, MCT and founder at Powercademy, where we help businesses upskill their teams in the Power Platform and Microsoft AI space. And today I'm going to be doing a full deep dive into the Dataverse MCP, what it is, why you should care, and the different configuration options that you have available within it. So in this video we're going to be breaking down the following concepts. For starters, we're going to understand what an MCP is in the first place. Then we're going to go through setting up the Dataverse MCP server, and this will be all of the prerequisites and what you need in the first place before you can actually get started. And then we're going to show you the 3 paths that you have available to you to connect your Dataverse MCP. That includes Copilot Studio, Visual Studio Code with GitHub Copilot, and any non-Microsoft clients like Claude. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what the Dataverse MCP is and how you can get it set up on your environment. Before we get into any sort of Dataverse or Power Platform specific areas, I want to first go through what an MCP is for those of you who might not know. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's an open protocol that was developed by Anthropic, or those people who you might know who developed Claude. It basically allows your AI tools to talk to your data in a standardized way. This is often commonly described as a universal adapter. So if we look at this diagram here, you have your AI agents on the left-hand side, and these can be Copilot Studio, GitHub Copilot, or any third-party applications like Claude. You have your MCP interface layer here in the middle, like the Dataverse MCP in this case, and this layer talks to your business apps, and it's that wedge in between your AI agents and your business applications. So instead of building custom integrations for each of these different areas, you can just connect it to one interface layer, which can then speak to your business apps. So what Microsoft has done is turn Dataverse into one of those MCP servers, which means Copilot Studio, GitHub Copilot, and Claude can now all talk to your business data within Dataverse. So now the question is, what does Dataverse actually expose through MCP? And the answer to that right now is 11 tools. Now this table was taken from the Microsoft Learn docs, which you can find in the description below, and it showcases right now all of the core functionality that you can achieve using an MCP. So things like creating records, describing tables, listing tables, reading queries, updating records, creating tables, updating tables, and really anything that you could do. So anything you'd be able to do in the interface, your AI agents can now do through the MCP server. As I mentioned right now, there's 3 main client paths that you can take on this journey of the Dataverse MCP. So we've got Copilot Studio here in this case, which is building agents for business users. So for whatever reason, if you need to expose the Dataverse MCP to business users, you would do it through Copilot Studio. Then Visual Studio Code, and this will be a developer coding assistant. So if any developers need full context of your Dataverse schema, tables, etc., and need all of that access available to them, they can connect to the MCP server and have all that context native within their IDE. And you can also connect external AI tools like Claude through a local proxy, which effectively allows you to use these tools with the MCP server as well. So a good example is using Claude Desktop and being able to talk to your Dataverse data using Claude. Of course, this does come with a set of risks, and it's always best practice to use the Microsoft tooling when you can, but if you do need to use those external tools, it's available to you. And what we're going to do is go through each of these 3 client paths today, and I'll come back to this slide in each section so you know exactly what we're showing. But first, let's get our environment set up, because none of this works without the correct configuration in the first place. Okay, so I've opened up my browser here, and I'm just going to go into make.powerapps.com. I'm going to make sure I'm in my right environment, and the first prerequisite and requirement at this time of recording is managed environments are required. So if your environment isn't managed where you're trying to run the Dataverse MCP server, it's not going to work. And the way that you can check this is if you come into Settings, Admin Center. Within the Admin Center, come to Manage, then come into the environment in question, so in this case YouTube Development. And here, instead of Edit Managed Environments, let's take an environment that isn't managed in this case. You can see it's going to say Enable Managed Environments. Now, if you have this option available to you, it means that this environment isn't currently managed. And to be honest, you have a column here as well, which will tell you without going into any of that settings. But in this case, our environment is managed, as you can see here is yes. But if you want to turn an environment into managed, you can come into here and select Enable Managed Environments. Now, of course, this does come with its cost considerations. So at this time of recording, if you enable managed environments, everyone who is authenticated to use that environment would need a Power Apps or Power Automate Premium license. So it comes with significant costs in this case. But if they already have access to Dataverse, then the likelihood is they already have premium licensing. So let's assume the environment that we've got is managed, in this case YouTube Development. What I'm now going to do is enable some features within the environment. So I'm going to click onto this. I'm going to come into Settings here on the top. I'm going to go to Product and then Features. And there's a few things that I need configured here. So the first thing is turning Dataverse Search on. The MCP requires Dataverse Search to be on. I'm not sure if it works with default. You'll have to check the documentation for that, but I always recommend turning this on in this case. Then if you do a Control F and type in Dataverse MCP, now for our use case, we're just going to allow MCP clients to interact with the Dataverse MCP server, but the GA version, meaning generally available. You can also tick this one on to allow people to connect to the preview version, but we're not going to need this in this case, so we're just going to tick this and make it don't allow. Then the next step we want to do is, of course, save this and then go into advanced settings. It's going to open up a new tab for us. And if this is your first time using and integrating with Dataverse MCP, you'll only see 3 of these. So you'll see the Dataverse MCP CLI tool, the Microsoft Copilot Studio app, and the Microsoft GitHub Copilot app. For our use case, I recommend just enabling all of these 3, so you actually have full access to all of this, and you don't run into any blockers. And the way that you do that is you just double click into one and turn is enabled to yes. Okay, now that we've done that, the environment is ready. So we can now connect to our first client, which is Copilot Studio. So why Copilot Studio first? Well, Copilot Studio is where you build an agent for end users, right? So a chatbot or an agent that sits inside Teams, on a website, or wherever your business users are. The value here is that you can create an agent that answers natural language questions about your business data. So for example, if someone has a question around their opportunities, how many opportunities they have, their top account, or they want to create a new contact within Dataverse, they can do this all through Copilot Studio without needing to have a custom application to do it or write any queries. So if you want a bottom line here, it's effectively the business user path. You're asking the question, do people actually need to interact with the MCP that isn't just developers? And if the answer here is yes, then you want to set this up. So the way that we set this up is open up our Copilot Studio portal, and we want to come into agents here on the left-hand side and create blank agents. Then give your agent a name. So in this case, we're just going to call it Dataverse MCP Demo version 2, and then we're going to select create. And then once that agent is set up, you can come into tools, and then we're going to add a tool. Now, what a lot of people might do is they'll come into the tabs here and come into model context protocol. And don't worry about these are ones that I've created beforehand to kind of test this. But you'll see Dataverse MCP server here, which was the old way and the pre-built connector way to connect to the Dataverse MCP. Now you can see in brackets here, it's deprecated. So if I open this up, you can see that Microsoft are no longer supporting this. So I don't recommend doing it this way at this time of recording. A better way to do it is to come into Model Context Protocol and then configure the Dataverse MCP here. The way that we do that is follow this form that's set out for us, and I'll take you through this step by step. So for starters, you want to give this a server name. So we're just going to call this Dataverse MCP server version 6 because I've done a lot of tests. Then we're going to need a server description. So in this case, we're just going to say connects to Dataverse tables and records. And all this is, if you come into the Power App Studio, come into your settings here and go into session details. What you're going to need to do is take your instance URL, copy it, come back here, paste. And what we want is to take the last / out and then type in /API/MCP. And if we come into the Microsoft Learn documents, you can see here under Dataverse MCP server URL, this is the URL that we use to connect to the Dataverse MCP. So we've got that instance, and then we've got /API/MCP. So now that we've got all of this, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So there are 3 authentication types. We've got none, API key, and OAuth 2.0. Firstly, I've tried none, and it doesn't work, and I'm not sure why. API key is not something I've tried yet, but if I do OAuth URL, you get 3 more types here. You get dynamic discovery, you get dynamic, and you get manual. I tested dynamic discovery and dynamic, and neither worked. They both throw a JSON parsing error because the Dataverse MCP endpoint at this time of recording doesn't support dynamic client registration just yet. So what I found is that manual is the way to go. Now this creates a layer of complexity because we actually have to go into Azure, register an app, and give it the privileges that it needs that we then populate with the details here. If you've never been in Azure, don't worry, I'm going to go through it step by step exactly the way to set it up. But this is definitely something you should consider before you get started with this. Okay, so let's register our app within Azure. And what we'll do is open up a new tab. And I've got portal.azure.com already open for me. And what we want to do is go to app registrations here. And if you don't see it here, you can search for it here on the top. We're going to click on here, go on to new registration. And we're just going to call this Dataverse MCP Copilot Studio version 6. We can make it single tenant only since the Dataverse data is within our Powercademy tenant. And we're going to ignore this URI redirect for now. We're going to select register, and then we're immediately going to go to API permissions here. What we want to do now is give this app registration the permissions it needs to access the Dataverse MCP, reading and writing the data with the authenticated user's permissions. So for example, if someone has access to the MCP but they can't create contact records, they wouldn't be able to do it through the Dataverse MCP anyway. And this is the way that we set this up. So what we're going to do is add a permission. We're going to go to Dynamic CRM. And what we need is user impersonation switched on and also MCP switched on. And we're going to select add permissions. And then we're going to grant admin consent for Powercademy, select yes, and then we've got that sorted for us. Then what we're going to do is go to certifications and secrets. We're going to do a new client secret, and then we're going to type a description. So we're just going to put Dataverse MCP secret. We're going to leave it on the recommended expiration date and select add. And immediately you need to copy this value. If you don't copy it here, then you won't be able to see it again and you have to create another one. So click on copy. And once this is copied, go back into Copilot Studio and enter your secret here. Then it asks for our client ID. And the way that we get this is we go to overview and we copy the application ID here. Copy to clipboard, come back and paste. Then an authorization URL. There's a certain template you need to follow here. And I'll put this template on the screen for you. But we're just going to paste that in and replace where it says tenant ID with our actual tenant ID. And where we get this is if we go to the Power Apps Maker Studio, come into settings again, and then tenant ID will be listed here. And we're just going to copy it where it says tenant ID. Then the token URL, which is very similar to the authorization URL, but again, this will be on the screen for you and also in the description so you can copy and paste it. We effectively want this template and again, replace our tenant ID here. We can just take this from the top and paste it into tenant ID. Then the refresh URL, we can just make it the same as the token URL. And for scope, what we want is another template. And instead of your org URL, we want to come to the Power Apps Maker Studio again. Take your instance URL, copy this, and with this first slash, we just want to take this, select it, and then paste our organization URL here. You can see I've got this wrong, so I just need to take the HTTPS out, and then this is correct. Okay, so once we create this, our redirect URL will also be generated, and I'll show you what we do with that. So select create, and we'll get this pop-up saying the tool was created successfully, and we want to copy this redirect URL by selecting the copy button here. And we want to go back into Azure, come into authentication, ensure we are in our app registration that we just created, come to add redirect here, select web, and then paste that URL here. You can leave all of this how it is and select configure, back out, make sure it was added, and we're good to go from the Azure side. So once this is done, select next, and it's going to prompt us to connect with our login. So we're going to select not connected here and select create new connection, create, and it's going to authenticate on our account. Once this is done, you'll see a green tick if everything's gone well, and we'll select add and configure. And now even after that, it will take us to the details screen of that tool, and you might see this error here on the bottom, saying that you couldn't retrieve the requested items. Now, if we look into this a little bit further, you can see straight away that the application that we created in Azure is not authorized to access the MCP. And the reason for this is if we go back to the allowed MCP clients, we actually don't have the application that we just registered within Azure available here. So what we need to do is create it by selecting new here in the top. We're going to give this a name, so we'll just say Copilot Studio Custom MCP. Again, I'm just going to call this version 6. And it's going to ask us to give it a unique name. Just put new underscore. I've seen that that usually works because it needs a very specific format. And again, we're just going to do version 6. We need the application ID. So what we're going to do is go to Azure, go to Overview, and take the app ID here, copy, come back, paste, and we're going to say is enabled to yes. Then we're going to save and close, and then we'll see that available in the list. So what we now want to do is go back to Copilot Studio, come into Tools, and what I recommend is selecting the Refresh tools here in the top. You can see it says last refresh now, and this might take a couple of minutes to actually configure, but if we click back onto here, you can see we still have the problem, so we're going to refresh this, and we're going to give this a couple of minutes to actually configure in the back end. If it still doesn't work, then give the whole page a refresh, and just keep doing that until it does. And the way that you'll know it works is those 11 tools that I showed you in the previous slide, you'll see them all listed here. And that means that the MCP is now configured and ready for you to use. Now on the right-hand side, we have an area to test our agent, and we're going to test the MCP in this case. So if I type in the prompt, list tables in Dataverse, what it should go and do now is take all of the data from Dataverse from a table perspective and bring it to me within the chat. It's going to need to authenticate us, so we're just going to select this Open Connection Manager. And once this is open, select Connect. It will ask us to create or pick a connection. We will just select Submit, and this should now turn into a green tick. Okay, and now we're back here. We've started a new test session. I recommend doing that. And if it still throws any errors or anything while you do this, just give it a couple minutes for it to settle and refresh a few times and it should actually fix. What I do recommend doing for the purposes of this demo as well is to disable web search. If you come into overview, you can disable it here. You can see our Dataverse MCP server tool is here. If you're still running into issues, just come into here and select refresh. And you can see we'll get the list of the tools. Then we're going to go to test. We're going to do a new test session. We're going to try the prompt list tables in Dataverse. Select enter. And you can see immediately it's called the Dataverse MCP server. It's called the list tables through the model context protocol action. And you can see it says it contains a large number of tables. And here are some examples. Now if I ask it to describe the table account and select enter, you can see it's going to call the describe table MCP action. And it gives us all of the primary keys, the names, the common attributes, even the relationship fields. And it even prompts us to say, do you want me to show you the data, insert a new account record, or update or delete existing data? If I just say how many account records do I have, paste, enter, you can see it says there are 11 accounts currently in your Dataverse environment. And the way that we validate this is we come into our Power Studio, come into tables, we're in the same environment, we'll come into account, we're going to select edit. You can see in this case we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I go like this, 11 records. Now let's say I wanted to add a new record. If I come back into my Copilot Studio agent tool, and I say create a new account called test MCP2 company, rather than just company, select enter, you can see on the left hand side it's called create record, and if I go back into the Power App Studio, select refresh, you can see that that's been created. So through an agent, I have direct control of my Dataverse data. So now that's Copilot Studio done. So let's look at the developer side, which is Visual Studio Code. So VS Code is a completely different use case. You're not building an agent here. You're effectively a developer who wants their coding assistant to understand your Dataverse data model. So if you think about schema names, the data itself within it, or if you take an example of you writing a plugin in C#, or building a PCF control, or maybe even debugging a Power Automate expression, your AI assistant can actually query the live schema, pull real data, and generate code based on what's actually in your environment. That's the real value of VS Code here. It is the developer path. And the setup, in my opinion, is so much simpler. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, of course, is open up Visual Studio Code. And then what we want to do is select Control, Shift, and P. And we want the command MCP add server. Now, you won't see this at the top here. You'll have to type in MCP, add server. Click on this, click on HTTP, and here it's going to ask for the URL of the MCP server. Now, remember from the Microsoft Learn documents, if I bring that up, we're going to need this Dataverse MCP server URL with the organization name here. So what we're going to do is just copy this into Visual Studio Code and replace this with our org name. And again, for anyone who's forgotten, we get that from our settings, session details, and then we get it from the instance URL here. We're going to select enter. It's going to ask us to give it a name. We're just going to call this my Dataverse MCP server, and then maybe just YouTube. Select enter. And you can see it will open up an MCP JSON file. We'll select allow. It will ask us to authenticate with an account. Here we'll do howden@powercademy.com. And you can see it's now authenticated with this MCP. What you want to do also is make sure you save this, so do a Control S. And then now what we want to do is open up Copilot Chat. So we'll just select the sidebar here, and we'll see chat here on the right-hand side. You can see I've been testing this. And ensure in this case, we're just going to make this a little bit bigger. And then what we want to do within Copilot Chat is make sure agent mode is selected. We don't want ask or plan in this case. And then we're going to select add context here. It'll open up this in the top, select tools, type in MCP, and you can see the one that we just created is here at the top. We'll click on this, and we can ask it the same prompts. So for example, list tables in Dataverse. You can see it's using the context of the MCP, starting up those MCP servers, and you can see it's cracking on trying to find that data for us. It might give you something to actually accept, so we're going to select allow in this session. You can see something's failed in the top, but it gives us the listed tables successfully here in the bottom. If we try this again by selecting add contacts, going into tools, typing in MCP, connecting to the one that we created, and if we say something like create a new account called test MCP3 company, let's see how that gets on. You can see the account was created successfully. And if I go into the back end and open up the account table, we should see that new record now within it. Yep, we can see test MCP3 company has been added to the system. So same functionality, but within a different interface. Now, there's one more option I want to mention. We've covered VS Code, we've covered Copilot Studio, but what about non-Microsoft clients? So this would be the third path. And of course, as I mentioned, it's non-Microsoft clients like Claude Desktop and connecting those to the Dataverse MCP server. Now this uses a local proxy that you install on your machine, which handles the authentication itself. Now I did test this, and honestly the setup is really involved. You need the .NET SDK or the NPM package, and you need to configure the tenant IDs and the connection URLs, and the authentication flow can be very fiddly when you're getting started with it. So I'm not going to demo it in this video, but if you do want to see a full walkthrough of the Claude Desktop setup, just let me know in the comments and I'll do a separate video on it. The key thing to know now is it does exist, and Dataverse MCP isn't just locked to Microsoft tools. Any MCP compatible client can connect to it. All right, let's wrap this up with some key takeaways. So to summarize, the Dataverse MCP is genuinely powerful. You can have your AI talk to your business data in natural language, and if you think about the benefits that that could have for people who don't want to use a CRM or an application or need to make quick changes to information on the fly or re-changes on the fly, the MCP can be really powerful to do that. All of the security is dealt with in Dataverse, and you just expose that to your end users if we're using the business case. And that can be a big deal for a lot of businesses. Now here's some key takeaways, right? The managed environments is required, and this can be a deal breaker for some businesses who are operating on a budget. Manual OAuth, from what I saw, is the most reliable method for Copilot Studio. There's 11 tools available to you. You've got full CRUD, schema, and search. The Dataverse security roles are enforced within Dataverse. And of course, billing does apply for non-Copilot Studio agents. Now on the licensing side, there's a really good guide here from a good friend of mine, Yuka Niran. And you can see while this was updated in December 30th, he is keeping this up to date with a lot of articles that he is doing. But it gives you the licensing requirements, the different scenarios, and you can have a read of this if you're considering using Dataverse MCP for your business. I'll put this in the description if you're interested in checking it out. Now, if you're watching this and thinking my team needs to understand how these AI concepts within the Power Platform actually work, then that's exactly what we do at Powercademy. We run hands-on workshops to help businesses within the Microsoft ecosystems get their teams up to speed with all of these changes happening within AI and Power Platform, within the Microsoft space, of course. Now, if this does sound like something your organization would need, there's a link at the top of the description for you to book a call with us, and we can have a quick conversation to see if we're a fit. And finally, if this was useful, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, do all of that good stuff. And yeah, let me know what you want to see. Is it a deep dive onto Dataverse Skills, which is built on this Dataverse MCP and recently has dropped? Is it taking a look at how to install this within third-party applications like Claude Code? And also, if you found a way to get the other authentication types working with the Dataverse MCP, do let me know in the comments and we can update this video. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm going to call it a day, and I will see you in the next one. So take it easy.